The NFL draft is almost here, but there is time for one final mock draft to end all the mock drafts before we get that lovely, lovely real draft capital. I'm joined by the phenomenal, the one and only Jeff Bell, Dynasty captain over at Football Guys. You will know him on Twitter at @ForWhomJBellTolls. Jeff, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fantastic, Rich. You mentioned it. We are in draft week. We are ready to go. It's been a long process that it always is, but one of the most exciting weeks of the year. And we're ready to see where these players land and see where we're going to rank them even without that information.
Absolutely. It feels like draft season gets earlier and earlier and it gets longer and longer every single year. But yeah, we are almost there, And Jeff, you are the guest, so I'm going to give you the honor. You can go 101 or you can hand it over to me. It's completely up to you.
I'm going to hand it to you because I want to see where you go in this direction, because it seems to be a pretty strong consensus in some areas, but I think 101 is a little bit more open to interpretation than maybe many believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, look, I started draft season 3 months ago with a mock draft where I said, I think there's a consensus 101. I'm bucking the trend. I've got a guy that is 97th percentile prospect wide receiver in my model. I think he's going to go number 2 overall in the NFL draft. I think he's a transcendent player. I think I've said for the last 3 months, I think he's going to be a 100% snap share guy at wide receiver that moonlights at corner. So I'm going to kick it off. I'm going to go Travis Hunter here, 101, and maybe set the ball rolling with a little bit of fire off the bat.
Yeah, you definitely did do that, because when I said there's not as consensus as many believe, I didn't have Travis Hunter in there. I like that though. I think you're exactly right in terms of his potential production. His ability is definitely there. I think he's an elite level player. That's a fun pick, because I was going to let you pick between Ashton Jeanty and Cam Ward, because I think it's a real conversation with Cam Ward going number 1 in the draft, in the Superflex draft, on if he should be there Jeanty or not. And it seems like the community consensus is on it's got to be Jeanty. I'll go ahead and go with Jeanty for this exercise, but I do think it's open to if you need a quarterback, it doesn't necessarily have to be Jeanty.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very valid conversation. If we're talking of percentile outcomes, I think that 50th percentile and above, Cam Ward's a more valuable pick than Ashton Jeanty, just because of the value of a quarterback in these Superflex formats and what they can do for you. I think the problem is that the range of outcomes, I think Ashton Jeanty's much more likely to hit a kind of a better percentile outcome than Cam Ward. But if Cam Ward's a competent starter, Ashton Jeanty would have to be transcendent to be of equal value, basically. So I think it's well worth a conversation. I'll happily take Cam Ward here at 3. Do you think if you were on in the draft, sat on the board, and you had that conversation where you're looking at Jeanty, but you're thinking maybe I need a quarterback, maybe I'll grab Cam Ward, are you looking to trade back from the potential 101, or in this case it would have been the 102 to get that 103, or are you just taking Cam Ward ahead of Ashton Jeanty in that situation?
I'm probably weighing and seeing if I can go get somebody that's maybe younger but a little bit more established than Cam Ward potentially. I think maybe might be the way to play that, especially given the rookie fever season that we might be operating in, because and again, it comes down to your league. It comes down to how that 101's being valued, how Ashton Jeanty is viewed there. I think it's to flip the 101 and the 102. I think that probably that person at the 102 is probably like, well, wait, why are you doing this? Like, I don't know if I want to give anything up. Like, I'll just let you take Cam Ward and I'll just get Ashton Jeanty instead of trading up for him. I think that's probably maybe always in play in that type of scenario. But again, kind of walking around that market, seeing if there's somebody, because sometimes you see these people be sitting out there with like Trevor Lawrence or Justin Herbert, maybe another quarterback, the Baker Mayfield or something like that. And they might be open to maybe you grab like a Justin Herbert instead.
Yeah, I think if you can get Herbert or Trevor Lawrence for any pick in this year's draft, I think that's an absolute slam dunk for me. So I love that. You're back up at the 104. Feels like for me a little bit of a tier break after those top 3. Would you agree with that, or do you think there's somebody else that should be in that conversation?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that for a lot of the process, we probably would have said Tet McMillan should be in that conversation, but until we see that draft capital, because it seems to be a little bit all over the board. You're seeing him drop into 18 at the Seahawks in some places versus maybe number 5 to the Jags. So maybe waiting to see where that lands. I'm going to go with Omarion Hamtpon here. I think that he seems it does seem to be 3 running backs that are leaning pretty strong in the top 20 picks right now. And I think if you're getting 3 running backs in the top 20 picks, you're probably grabbing them relative to maybe some of the questions about McMillan or another position.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I love Hampton. I think he's, a real rock solid prospect and someone we'd probably be far more excited about and talking about a hell of a lot more if it wasn't for Ashton Jeanty. But you hinted at three running backs kind of locked into the top 20. I think I'm going to take the third of those, and it is TreVeyon Henderson. I think if we're looking, I always preach upside, swing for the fences, chase that kind of high outcome. And TreVeyon Henderson feels like that. I think if he has that 100th percentile outcome, he's a potential league winner. He's a potential, game breaker for Dynasty in terms of the explosive ability, the pass catching ability, the potential to be a 3-down back that I think some people are potentially limiting that ceiling, but I think it's within his range of outcomes. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. And you're back up at the 106, and a guy that some people would have been taking 101, 102 is still sat on the board in Tet McMillan. Is he the pick here?
It's close for me in my mind right now between McMillan and another player, but I will go with McMillan here. I think that there's another player that merits consideration, but maybe some of the history about his position might give some pause. But right now, I'll just go with McMillan. I think he's the most valuable wide receiver on the board, and I do feel pretty comfortable he's at least in that top half of the draft. I think we would be floored to see him fall out of round 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the talk as we get closer to the draft, it starts to get slightly ridiculous. I think he's still an elite prospect, great receiver, and I think that if he falls outside the top 20, I'd be pretty shocked. But I'm going to go, I've just preached about chasing upside, always looking for upside. I'm going to go with what I think is one of the safest picks in this draft. I just can't see a world where this guy isn't a rock solid, at worst, wide receiver 2 in the NFL. And it's Emeka Egbuka. I think, great prospect, does all the dirty stuff that coaches will love. And I'm just really, really excited to have him on my Dynasty teams, because I think he's going to be a guy that, could easily be 120, 140 targets a year, right around that 100 reception mark, year in, year out for the next 6-7 years.
Yeah, I recorded an episode of the Dynasty Show today with my co-host Dave Kluge, and we were talking about Emeka Egbuka right now. And I know Denver's made some waves about wanting to trade up for a wide receiver. And if you look at Sean Payton's history, Michael Thomas was there. I think he was gone before Chris Olave was there. But the Saints definitely love their Ohio State players when Sean Payton was a coach. And I think that when you look at what the Broncos would need within their offense, Emeka Egbuka really fits very, very well there. So I think that that's in play, and they could even move up the board to make sure they get him. I'm going to go with a guy I think that he is going to go in the top 10 of the draft. I mentioned the position history can be a little bit iffy, but I'm going to go Tyler Warren here at this pick. I think it's the upside is there to put him in the top tier. He is a monster of an athletic tight end. His size stands out. His ability after the catch down the field stands out. So I think that's all in play for him. And we saw obviously the breakout with Brock Bowers last year, but absent that, tight end has been a little bit iffy, especially early in players' careers. But looking at a player that very likely will go top 10 in the draft at the 108 in this draft, I think you got to grab him.
Yeah, so we are drafting with a 0.5 tight end premium here. Jeff, throughout this entire process, I've been a noted Tyler Warren hater, shall we say. Do you think that his unique ability in terms of where he can line up all over the field, in the backfield and everything, he's not a traditional inline tight end. He's not a traditional kind of slot tight end. He is just very untraditional in terms of the type of player, how he was used. Do you see that as a positive or a negative as we head towards the next level?
I think it's a positive. I don't really have concerns about him playing inline. He's a monster. He's huge. And so I think that he can be that inline player. I think in Penn State's offense, one, they didn't have any receivers at all. And Keandre Lambert-Smith was like the only receiver they had, and he transferred out. And so That I think was a big part of it, of trying to come up with something creative, because they flowed through those running backs that they have, and then Tyler Warren, and just trying to figure something out offensively, despite having Drew Aller there and his upside potentially. I think in the game they lost to Notre Dame, I don't know that any wide receivers caught a pass. And so I think it was just trying to figure something out absent of actual starting caliber wide receivers at that level of college football. And that's where I think it came in with Warren.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Well, before we get to my pick here at the 109, if you are joining us for the first time, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, Best Ball season is just around the corner. Tom and Tyler are going to get you set up to win lots and lots of money in those Best Ball tournaments. And of course, Dynasty season doesn't stop now. I will be rolling out lots of content post-draft and getting you set up for those startups as well. I'm going to come up with the 109. I talked about Egbuka being a safe prospect. I also feel like this with Quinshon Judkins. I don't think he necessarily has that kind of top 10 elite ceiling. But if you told me that Quinshon Judkins is a rock solid RB2, 4 of the next 5 seasons or something like that, I'd absolutely believe it. I think he's going to be a 60% opportunity share guy that maybe gets someone to spell him for some third down, some explosive plays. But I think we know exactly what we're getting when we draft Quinshon Judkins.
Yeah, I like that pick, and he definitely tested out better than maybe a lot of people thought. It's the running joke of he broke off the 75-yard run in the national title game, but it hurt his stock because it wasn't the 80-yard run that scored. But no, I think he's definitely very much geared for the way the NFL's been played right now, and so that's a good pick there. I'm going to go with Shedeur Sanders here. I think it's super flex. I think there's fair to be a little bit concerned about him, and we're seeing even reports today, the last couple of days, that he might fall out of round 1. But when you get to the back half of the first round here, taking a chance on, I do think he is going to be a first round quarterback. As if he drops down to Pittsburgh, then all of a sudden he's playing with DK Metcalf and George Pickens. That might not be the worst thing in the world. So I think being able to grab a guy that you would expect to be a starter at this level, you flash back to last year, there was a lot of pause around guys like Bo Nix and Michael Penix, and especially at like this point of the cycle about if they were actually first round picks or not. And then everybody that took Penix and Bo Nix, I think, is beyond thrilled with those picks.
Yeah, absolutely. I put out a tweet, I think probably a week or so ago, saying, outside of essentially the lock top picks over the last 3 years, we've basically got the valuation of quarterbacks wrong every single outside of those top ones, in terms of, Malik Willis on the final pre-draft consensus big board was 10 overall. We had Will Levis was 6 overall. Like we're really bad at understanding the valuations of what the non-top picks of, last year, obviously 1, 2, 3, year before that 1, 2. And I feel like that's the same with this year. Like you could tell me Shedeur Sanders goes anywhere from 2 to probably like 40 and I'd believe it. The same with Jaxson Dart, potentially the same with Jalen Milroe. Like there's a lot of huge range of outcomes on these quarterbacks, and I don't really know what to believe. With Shedeur Sanders, now we know that he's a slightly undersized, not the strongest arm, not the most athletic. Do you think that makes him let's call it less sexy, less appealing pick for fantasy, because he doesn't have that potential high upside that comes with either the rushing or the kind of downfield targets and deep shots?
I'm still a little skeptical that he doesn't have the rushing. He's dropped some things, and certainly it might be part of the process, but he's dropped some things that basically suggested he was never asked to run. It didn't mean he can't run. And I think that's an interesting nugget. I understand potential concerns around there. And right now, before the draft, you feel a little bit leery about where to take him, because you don't know who he's going to be playing around, what type of system it might be, what his weapons are going to be. Those types of things, I think, are probably fair and legitimate questions. And again, you don't know, is he a top 10 quarterback or is he going 40th in the draft? And so those all contribute to pushing him down the board. I think there's enough there that, even like Jared Goff has given you top 12 weeks quite often. So I think that there's paths there that if he is a long-term starter, it's kind of hard. You really have to run a thin thing there to be a long-term starter and to not realize fantasy value.
Yeah, absolutely. As a reliable starter in a Superflex format is incredibly valuable. It doesn't matter whether they're giving you back-end QB2 production year in, year out. That's still incredibly valuable because, that back-end QB2 production is still replacement level. And in Superflex formats, that's hard to find. So I am going to stop the slide here for Luther Burden. Now, it feels like there's a few players that the range of outcomes are massive. We talked about Shedeur Sanders, potentially where he gets drafted will probably impact that. I think Luther Burden might have the widest range of outcomes in this entire league. Like, his ability with the ball in his hands, the explosive ability is amazing, but also the usage of, being very manufactured touch heavy, potentially a slot only at the next level. Again, he's one that I could believe anything in terms of what he is in 2-3 years. I think he has the potential to be, top 5 Dynasty wide receiver. I think that's truly how talented this guy is. I could also believe that he can't carve out a role as a top 2-3 wide receiver on his team and ends up going the Kadarius Toney route kind of thing. Like, it's wild, and I think draft capital is going to be a lot of that. But at the back end of the first round, when there feels like there's been a bit of a tear drop off, I'm happy to take the risk on punting for Luther Burden.
Yeah, and it's certainly not the Quinshon Judkins slide where you're walking in. People had him as Devy wide receiver 1 before his final year, and then I don't know that he even got drafted. But it does feel like he's had about as bad a process as a pre-draft process is just about any receiver that I can think of, especially when you look at that last year in Missouri. I think that there's real things there in terms of them flipping their offensive coordinator. His usage was really not ideal, and his quarterback wasn't the best. So those all play into it. And then the hand size, all those types of things. But I think you're exactly right that when you see the upside flash on tape, it's there. The upside is definitely there to be that type of player that gets a ton of volume in modern NFL offenses.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to finish off the first round here, Jeff, with you taking 112.
Colston Loveland is who I'm going to take here. I think it's usually when we're at this part of the, we're close to having draft capital, but we don't have draft capital. I'm going to defer to guys that I feel really, really good about being first round picks. I think that Colston Loveland has a really great chance to be a top 15 pick in the actual draft. And so I'm going to take him at the 112. I'm in an analyst league that Dave is the commissioner of, and I had the 112 and the 202 in that league, and I was seeing Shedeur Sanders and Colston Loveland slide down the board, and I was hoping to get both. And then my friend Jacob Sanderson grabbed Colston Loveland at the 110, and he really just kind of dashed my dreams on that. But I think that getting him at the 112, especially the way his game sets up to be a fantasy relevant tight end, a player that can create after the catch and do a lot of those short yardage type plays, that's where I'll definitely grab that at the 112.
Yeah, I'm really excited about Loveland. He's my tight end 1. I really believe that he transitions well. I think his ability and the role that he's played in college, you can see an easy transfer to the next level. And I think he's going to be, a position that normally takes time. Okay, we've been spoiled a little bit over the past few years, but I could see him having an impact almost immediately. I'm going to, I said at the top, I was kind of a Taylor Warren hater. I feel like I've also become a bit of a Kaleb Johnson hater, but I'll take him here at the 201. I'm comfortable spending a second round pick on him. I'm a little bit concerned about his transition. I think he needs to be in a zone heavy, preferably an outside zone heavy scheme. I think there's probably more highlights than consistent play. I've got some questions over his value add as a receiver, but yeah, when he's firing, when he's, if you're talking best 5 runs of most players in college, I think he'd potentially be 1 or 2. So yeah, very excited to spend a second round pick on him. Not sure I'd be comfortable spending a first rounder on him quite yet, unless he gets surprisingly good draft capital.
Yeah, so I do the bulk of my rookie stuff usually in January and February, like kind of driving for that Football Guys Rookie Guide version 1. And when I did that and saw and watched Kaleb Johnson, I didn't love him. And if you remember back then, there was a lot of people are having him as their running back 2. Like there was a lot of that going on. Some people are even out there as running back 1. Like there was a big high for him. And then testing kind of bore out what I kind of expected from the tape of people are throwing out him like as like a 4.35 type guy, like prior to actually running, and he's closer to a 4.5 guy. And so I agree with you on some of the concerns on him. I think that there's just some times where it's almost like for his body type, he like runs polite. Like I feel like sometimes where it's like, why are you so upright? Like blow somebody away. But no, I think there's elements of that. But I think in the right system, he definitely still does have upside. I'm going to go with Matthew Golden here. Again, a player that I feel, I don't know as that I feel as confident as I did before we knew the 40 was fake, but then there was a lot of talk about him going 12 to the Cowboys. But I do think that he does have a great chance to be a first round pick in this draft. And if not, I think he's going to go very, very early in round 2. Again, kind of mitigating some of the risk on where players might end up, but also I think I'm hitting the non-running back positions because the running backs are so good that you kind of, I feel like you can almost grab bag once you get a little bit later in the second and the third round, kind of grabbing some of these running backs before you know where they end up. And you're going to have a great chance at realizing some value off that. But again, the kind of exhausting the wide receivers and those types of positions while they're still there.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like the cliff comes a lot quicker at wide receiver and other positions than it does perhaps at the running back position. I'm going to shoot for upside here. Okay. We talked about range of outcomes. I'm going to go for the guy that I think if he hits could potentially be the 101 in startup picks, like Jalen Milroe, elite arm talent, maybe one of the most athletic players we've ever seen in the position. Yeah, okay, I have serious accuracy concerns. I have serious processing concerns. I don't know if he can operate from the pocket. But if there's a chance, we're drafting this with obviously pre-draft capital. If there's a chance he could sneak into the first round, he's been invited to the draft, whatever that means. I think there's no chance he's going at this point in rookie drafts if he is a first round pick. So yeah, really excited about the upside. Obviously, the bust potential is massive, but swing for the fences and see what happens.
I'm really proud of you. I love that. I love you for that. I think you're exactly right. To me, I feel like the Saints seem like a very, you got Kellen Moore kind of coming there, resetting that and coming out of having Jalen Hurts as his quarterback and winning the Super Bowl there. Plug Jalen Milroe into similar type concepts would be interesting and fun there. But I think that I'm less, like I was pretty convinced maybe a couple weeks ago that he would be a first round pick. I'm less there. I think it's kind of the late turn. It seems like he is going to be a second round pick, but I think he's going to go off the board pretty quickly as you see a couple of these quarterbacks at the top of the second round. I'm going to go with Dylan Sampson here. I think that leaning on youth, leaning on athletic upside, I think he's got a great chance to be a day 2 running back. You're kind of throwing a dart with these running back classes, but he is the type of player that, given him being a younger player, giving him being a higher upside, explosive type of a running back, I would be surprised to see him last into day 3. And I think if you can grab a day 2 running back right now at this point in the draft, you're going to take it.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I love Dylan Sampson watching him on tape. I really struggle to know exactly what he is because that offense is just not like anything else you ever see. And it's like I've never seen a guy. There were 2 or 3 plays where he ran against 3 men in the box.
Yeah.
Like what? How am I supposed to evaluate that? Like this is completely mental. But yeah, I like the player and I like, as you said, the athletic upside. I am going to go with a guy that's look, in fantasy football at running back position, I'm chasing pass catching and I'm chasing touchdowns. And I think Cam Skattebo could potentially tick both of those boxes between the 20s. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the athletic upside, but big guy who catches passes is always going to have me intrigued. So middle of the second round, I'm happy to take that punt there.
He's so fun. He's so fun to watch play, and you are right there on the pass catching, those types of things. I really enjoyed the Ringer NFL Draft Show was talking about him, and they said you can be white, you can be slow, but you can't be white and slow. And so that was kind of like their assessment of Cam Skattebo. But no, I think that you're exactly right there in terms of where he could end up with upside. I mean, he's got a game that translates to that. I'm going to go with Jaylen Noel. I think he is going to be, I would expect he's going to go round 2. I think he's the type of player that you're looking at when you're looking at profiles of wide receivers. He's the type of player that the athleticism, the after the catch ability can kind of contribute and be a volume type player at the NFL level. And I do think that he's going to go round 2, but I don't think he's going to go early round 2, which gives him a better chance of landing in a strong offense, I think. And I've got him, I did a 3-round mock that I released on Monday. I had him landing with Houston in round 2. And I feel like putting him with Houston would be very, very, very fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Jalen Noel's becoming very trendy. I feel like a lot of people are getting very excited about him, but it's very apparent to see. I think there is a high likely chance that he goes higher in the draft than perhaps we're all sitting here projecting. But I'm going ahead and I'm going to draft his teammate. I'm going to go with Jayden Higgins here. I think if you're drafting for 2025, I don't think Jayden Higgins is going to be hugely fantasy relevant, but I think this is a guy that's got the athletic build. I think he's got the intangibles and the raw talent that I think he could blossom. I've seen some people throw around the Nico Collins comp. I think that might be a little bit too ambitious, but it's that type of player that's perhaps not going to be amazing year 1, but I think he's got enough in there. If he can round out some route running ability and kind of work on the nuances of the position, I think he's got a really high ceiling. So yeah, really happy taking the flyer in the second round here.
All right, let's go with Jaxson Dart here. I don't know that I love Jaxson Dart, but I think that as you're getting into the back half of the second round, you're talking about a player that he could go round 1. I would be surprised if he doesn't go round 2 at this point. You're talking about Superflex. I'll go with Dart here.
I'm happy you drafted Dart because he was staring at me and I was thinking I'm going to have to draft him. But there's just so much that scares me. Any quarterback out of that offense, I think, is just always going to be very nervous for me when picking because I'm not quite sure how many times he was actually asked to process and make a true read. But yeah, it feels like potential first round pick at quarterback, good value at this point. I'm going to go with a guy that I just love watching, quite frankly. And I think that, again, he could sneak into the second round. I think he's a lock for the third round. Devin Neal, I think he's got 3-down capability. And I really like him. So, yeah, very happy to go and grab him and add him to my squad. You're now up at the 210 here, Jeff. Where are we going to be going?
Yeah, Neal is kind of like the running back connoisseur's favorite running back is how I feel like. Whereas like the people that looking for something flashy, he doesn't really smack you with it, but he's kind of doing all the right things. I will go another player that out of Ole Miss that I don't know that I necessarily love, but I'll go with Tre Harris here. I think it's, again, you're talking about guys that I think he's going to go round 2. He's not going to go day 3. I feel pretty confident about that. And I think that once you get to a certain level, especially with wide receivers, if you feel pretty good about them not going day 3, I feel like that's a good place to take them once you get to the back end of the second round or beginning of the third round.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like wide receivers built like that move like that, don't often drift into the third day. So, yeah, makes sense. I'm going to stick with the wide receiver position. I'm going to go with a guy that's kind of become my guy in this sort of draft cycle. Jalen Royals ticks a lot of boxes for me. I think, there is a slight concern about whether he's got the versatility coming from a small school to perform in the NFL. But I think underlying metrics pops in my model. I think the route running is there. So I think he's a really intriguing guy that could be, that second option in a lot of NFL franchises.
Yeah, I'll close it out. This team, if this is a team, they probably wouldn't make this pick. But me, as just kind of doing this exercise to make this pick, I'll do Mason Taylor, the tight end out of LSU. Again, a player that I don't think he's going to get in around one, but I think there's a chance. And I think that when you're kind of looking at, if a Philadelphia decides to trade down or a Kansas City decides to trade down, he could be that type of player that they take maybe in the middle of the second round and like can step in and be that type of high upside player. It seems to be a consensus on him is just not. I feel like throughout the entire process, it's like I'll see like the draft Twitter and the draft people talk about him maybe going in the first round, and then I'll see like the fantasy mocks, it'll be like the 401, and it's just kind of like these things are not marrying up right now.
Yeah, I feel like you're talking into realism, my worst nightmares, because I go to bed at night praying that Mason Taylor is still available on the board when the Jets draft 40th overall, and he's our second round pick. So yeah, I love Taylor. As I said, I'm talking into existence the Jets drafting him in the second round. So yeah, very, very much agree about the discrepancy between draft Twitter and fantasy Twitter as such. But that is it, the top two rounds. Jeff, we're going to fire through this third round. Maybe a quick one line about each pick. We'll try and get through this as quick as possible. I'm going to kick off the third round. I'm going to shoot for absolute explosion, absolute upside, and just absolute fun. RJ Harvey, think he could be really interesting and explosive at the next level.
I'll do everything that you just said, but I'll apply it to Bashal Tutin. I'll take him at the 302. Guys at his size that ran what he ran, they don't usually last super late into the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolute combine monster. Very intriguing prospect. I'm going to do what you said, but look at production rather than athletic measurables. Harold Fannin broke my rookie model, 100th percentile in 3 of the metrics that I measure, but slightly questionable measurables has knocked him down boards slightly.
I'll go with Damian Martinez here, physical running back that if he lands in the right situation can be a player that handles a lot of volume. Questions about where he might go, but again, you're kind of betting on a profile here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go Eilik Ayumanor, just big-bodied outside receiver, got real issues with his hands, but if he can learn to catch, I think he could be a good NFL receiver.
Give me Elijah Rojo here. I think that he closes out the top 5 tight ends really in my mind. I think that there's a pretty clear tier break between him and whoever your tight end 6 might be. Again, an athletic guy that big playmaker downfield. So,
and I will grab DJ Giddens. Feel this is ridiculous that we're getting this much value on him in this draft. A guy that probably is a second round pick last year if he comes out, given the state of the rookie drafts last year. But yeah, a potential 3-down workhorse and just a rock solid player.
Give me Jack Besh, another receiver that I think he's going to be a day 2 wide receiver. Making a bet here in late in round 3, grabbing a guy that I think will be a day 2 wide receiver is a bet that I'm going to make.
And I'll go back-to-back wide receivers. I'm going to grab Torrey Horton. Just does a lot of things well, and very excited about his potential. Think again, he's going to be a day 2 wide receiver, so very excited there.
We'll make it 3 in a row. Give me Kyle Williams. Kyle Williams is a dude. I think that I love him. He's been my favorite under-the-radar wide receiver throughout this. And again, something from what I've seen, draft Twitter not marrying up with fantasy Twitter. I'm convinced that some of what comes out of fantasy Twitter is he wasn't in sleeper in like the first cut, and people do those mock drafts, and those guys that aren't in there, like I'm convinced that they just get devalued until we actually get to the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also I'm missing a couple of key metrics on him. So currently he's not sat in my rookie model. So stuff like that, I think, as you said, knocks people down and makes people fall out of their front of their minds when it comes to stuff like this. I am going to go with Jordan James. Just feels like a ridiculous value. I think he's smooth, great vision, and in the right system with the right talent around him, I think he could be really interesting.
I'll take Jayden Blue. here. You talked about when you're looking at running backs, you're hunting touchdowns, receiving profile. I think Blue does have some level of receiving profile. I like explosion. I like really looking for splash plays when it comes to especially these running backs. I think that the model of the 230-pound guy that can get the ball 25 times is a little bit dead. I think you get these guys that can score on any play and like might get to those 12 to 15 touches, but can get you 110 yards and 2 touchdowns in those amount of touches.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is it. 3 rounds in the book. Hope you've all enjoyed it. Jeff, thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure. Always enjoy doing this with you. Remind, in case any of you watching didn't know where to find you, where can they find you and find your work?
Yeah, everything's at Football Guys right now. I'm putting out a lot of draft content because we are at the draft, and I'm able to put out content again because I'm out of tax season. So one of my favorite times of the year to be able to get back into the content grind and be able to meet with people like yourself, Rich. I feel like it's become almost an annual tradition at this point of you reach out to me when that rookie guide 1.0 drops, and I say, talk to me in 2 months, Rich. And then we usually do it about this time every year, and always happy to be able to do that.
Awesome. Well, if you aren't checking out Jeff's work, go ahead and do that. It is absolutely fantastic. And that rookie guide is phenomenal. And really, really stand up to all of that scrutiny, all of those people that will be flicking through it as the draft comes around in the next few days. But if you haven't, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe on your way out. And of course, stick around because there's plenty more content coming your way.